support operations there in Pantelleria Island. At that time, we did not have any ground troops there. So they were involved in a bombing campaign on Pantelleria Island. And I was told that the bombing campaign was so furious, I mean furious, that by the time the ground troops hit the shores on the island, the enemy had already surrendered. They surrendered to air power. And that was the Tuskegee Airmen's first baptism of fire. And imagine that, ground troops surrendering to air power. So there was many in Washington that took notice. There were many there in Europe that took notice as well. Yet, the Tuskegee Airmen remained there in North Africa. In the meantime, bombers under 8th Air Force were conducting missions over there in Germany, but they were incurring heavy losses, and I mean heavy losses. For example, during 1943, and in one operation in August of 1943, and again in October of 1943, there was a bomber formation, over 200 bombers. And this is in August of 1943. Over 200 bombers were sent on a campaign, and 60 of those bombers were shot down. 60 bombers. And the Air Force sustained heavy losses during Black October. They lost many more losses. And as it was, each day, the bombers were incurring heavy losses that could not be sustained. And this is before they had fighter escort. Well, eventually, the P-47s came along, and they were able to escort them only to a certain distance. Afterward, they had to turn back, and the bombers were basically on their own. But there were those in high command that thought the bombers should still be able to fend for themselves because the B-17s and the B-24s were armed with guns. But there were still those who thought that the bombers should still do well, despite the fact they were incurring heavy losses. Well, they were proven wrong, and basically, crew members could not expect to complete their full tour at the rate they were losing their bombers. So eventually, the high command deemed that it was necessary to change course. So eventually, the 99th was tagged to head to Italy, and eventually they were joined by the 301st, the 302nd, and the 100th Fighter Squadrons. Eventually, they combined to form the 332nd Fighter Group. They were assigned then to bomber escorts, and the reason why, one of the reasons why the bombers were losing was that eventually, when the P-51s came on the scene, they were escorted by other squadrons. But what happened was that the Germans did what, did the Sunker bunches. Whereas they would send a few of their airplanes past the bomber formation, whereas the escorts flying the P-51s would take off after them and leave the bombers exposed. Well, the Germans had a group of planes that came in the back door and started picking off the bombers one by one. And apparently there were some fighter groups that just didn't catch on, and day in, day out, here they come, a few German fighters, boom, past the formation, once again, The escorts would take them off and leave the bombers exposed. Well, it came time for the Tuskegee Airmen to be assigned to take over escort. And so eventually the Tuskegee Airmen were escorting a bomber formation, and Germans decided to take them on. Well, for the Germans, that was a mistake. When they did, the Germans lost several airplanes. The next day, the Tuskegee Airmen escorted the bomber formation. Once again, the Germans attacked the bomber formation. This time, Germans lost even more fighters. So the Germans realized there was a new kid on the block, and they referred to the Tuskegee Airmen during the war as the Black Birdmen. So as it was, the Tuskegee Airmen continued to escort the bombers, and at that time they had painted their tails red. And believe it or not, many of the bombers did not even know they were black at that time. All they knew is that they had the red tails. And they were providing effective fire bomber escort, and they really took notice of that. And so there were times when they were so effective at the bombing escort that the Germans would come up on a bomber formation. If they saw the red tails there, they would, in many cases, not even engage the bomber formation. And I even mentioned this before, and said when Germans attacked the bomber formation, it was like somebody taking a bat and hitting a beehive. Hit that beehive, somebody's going to get stung. And that's what the Germans learned the hard way. And to give you a little example of just how tenacious it was, the Tuskegee Airmen were very dedicated in protecting the bombers. So they stayed with the bombers. The Germans tried that sucker tactics on the Tuskegee Airmen, but the Tuskegee Airmen didn't fall for it. Germans would fly their, planes past the formation, and the Tuskegee Airmen stayed with the bombers. And so the Germans had to change tactics. So in one flight, there was a group of German fighters approaching bomber formation. And so some of the Tuskegee Airmen noticed that they were prepared to attack the bombers, so they went up there and intercepted the German fighters. And one name that came out was Clarence, and his nickname Lucky Lester, went up there and engaged several German fighters, shot down 2 of them, and was chasing the third. The third German pilot tried a spit-S maneuver, but he was too low and he ended up crashing into the ground. But just the same, Lucky Lester still got credit for the kill. And that whole engagement was over in just a matter of a few minutes. But it gives you an idea of just how tenacious the Tuskegee Airmen were. In another case, involved a bomber, a B-24 bomber that was had 2 of its engines shot out, and it was trying to make it back to England, but it was still over enemy territory. Trailing smoke, the pilot remarked to the crew to keep their eyes open for enemy fighters. And they figured, trailing that smoke and everything, somebody was going to pick them up. And so they just kept their eyes peeled. And eventually, someone called out the 3 aircraft approaching the bomber. And so the crew said, well, this is it. We got 2 engines shot out. It was still over enemy territory. And some of them really thought that was their last day on Earth. But as the 3 aircraft got closer, they saw that they had the red tails. It was the Tuskegee Airmen. And so the Tuskegee Airmen went and took their positions around the aircraft and proceeded to escort the bomber out of enemy territory, but they were still over enemy territory. So as they're flying along, eventually somebody called out, enemy fighters approaching. This time there were 8 German ED-109 fighters approaching the formation. And remember, there were 3 Tuskegee Airmen to protect that bomber. So as the aircraft approached, the 3 Tuskegee Airmen headed straight in for the formation and broke up the German fighter formation. The Germans wanted that bomber. If the bomber gets back, gets repaired, he's going to go back and start bombing the cities in Germany. So they were trying to get to the bomber. So as it was, the Tuskegee Airmen fought bravely to keep those 8 enemy fighters off of that bomber. And after several minutes, the Germans finally broke off the attack, and 6 of the aircraft left. And so remember, I said 8 aircraft approached, 6 left. What happened, 2 of the Tuskegee Airmen were fighting to keep the German fighters off, breaking up their attack. And during that time, one of the other pilots was taking off the German fighters. After the Germans lost 2 of their aircraft, that's when they broke off their attack. So after the Germans left the area, they retreated. The 3 Tuskegee Airmen took their positions around the bomber and safely escorted that B-24 out of enemy territory. So thanks to the heroics of the Tuskegee Airmen, that bomber and its crew made it safely back to base. Now this is typical on how the Tuskegee Airmen were protecting the bomber formations. And the bomber crews nicknamed them the Red Tail Angels. The Red Tail Angels from the bomber crews. And it got to the point where the Tuskegee Airmen were being requested. They didn't want any other bomber crew, escort fighters to escort their aircraft. They wanted only the Red Tails. And at that time, once again, they did not know they were black or Tuskegee Airmen. At that time, they weren't known as Tuskegee Airmen at that time. All they knew is that they had the Red Tails, and they provided the most effective bomber escort in Europe, which is the reason why they were being requested. Benjamin O. Davis, who was the commander, was so moved that he went up and renamed his P-51 by request. That's how moved he was. And so as it was, the Tuskegee Airmen continued to provide effective bomber escort. And there was a myth that said that they never lost a bomber. That was a myth. The Tuskegee Airmen doing the whole bombing escort missions, during the whole time they escorted the bombers, they lost just under 30. But that was a lot less than some of the other fighter escorts were losing. They would lose sometimes over 40 aircraft in one day. In one day, they would lose over 40, and sometimes even more. So that goes to show you why the bomber crews were, requesting the Red Tails and called them the Red Tails Angels. You know, when you purchase flight insurance or any kind of insurance, you want the best insurance that money can buy, which is the reason why we were requesting the Tuskegee Airmen. So as it was, they continued providing effective bomber escort. And one of the longest missions of the Tuskegee Airmen occurred when the bombers were heading for Berlin. And the Tuskegee Airmen were supposed to be relieved by another fighter group, which didn't show up. So the Tuskegee Airmen were forced to escort the bomber all the way to Berlin, 1,600 miles total. And the Germans, they had something waiting for that bomber formation. They had ME-163 bat rocket planes, and basically that's what it looked like, a bat plane with rockets. And the ME-262s, which was the first jet fighters used in war. So you had the ME-163s and the ME-262s waiting for the bomber formation when they approached Berlin. Well, as it was, when they reached Berlin, the Germans unpacked their ME-262s and ME-163 bat planes and leashed them on the bomber formation, which was a mistake because the Tuskegee Airmen took out 3 of the German fighters and damaged 5 others. And it realized at that point that Germany had nothing left to take on the Mustangs. And as Hermann Goering, who was German's air boss, remarked, he said the day he saw those Mustangs over Berlin, he knew the jig was up. Imagine that. And it wasn't that long afterward that, Germany surrendered. Because Germany threw everything it could, and yet they were being taken out. So, and I remember when I was there in Texas, there was a whole page article taken out by a gunner of the bomber. He went there and remarked on the Mustangs. He said, without those Mustangs, the bombers could never have achieved their goals. And he wrote a whole article on that, thanking the Mustangs for, allowing the bomber crews to do their jobs. And based on that, Germany eventually surrendered. But, I have come across many bomber crew members, and I spoke to them. A lot of the things I heard about the Tuskegee Airmen didn't come from the Tuskegee Airmen themselves. They came from the bomber crew. And some of them, as they were telling me their stories about how they were looking death in the eye, I mean, they looking at death. Death is grabbing at them. They close their eyes. Nothing happens. They open it, and there's the Tuskegee Airmen said, "We hear." And they basically, that's how they were. And some of these bomber crews, some of them had tears in their eyes because they told me they really thought that was going to be their last day on Earth. And boom, the Tuskegee Airmen came in and saved the day. And and give you an idea just how these bomber crew members were. And I go to these conventions, and there were Tuskegee Airmen conventions in different parts around the country, and they had bomber crew members came there. All they wanted to do was come there and shake their hands, say thank you. After all these years, they were still coming to these conventions just to say thank you. And one thing that really stands out in my mind was when my public relations officer, and I was president at the time of the VA Archer Duty chapter, and my public relations officer, which was Gerald Gordon, who spoke earlier, him and I went over to San Rafael because they had a special ceremony for Tuskegee Airmen over there. So as we walked into the building, there was this gentleman who approached us and said, Tuskegee Airmen, Tuskegee Airmen. I said, well, no, I'm not the original Tuskegee Airman. I'm just a member of the chapter. He said, I don't care. I just want to shake your hands. You're associated with them. I just want to shake your hands. Well, it was later that I found out who this guy was. He was actually looking for a pilot who actually saved his bomber. I eventually ran into that same person in Philadelphia at the convention there, and this time he had his daughter, and he had a big manila envelope. Inside the manila envelope was these two pictures. They were identical. They were taken in the cockpit from his aircraft, his bomber. It was sticking out towards the right window of his bomber, and just off the wingtip was a P-51, and he said, that's the pilot who saved my life, who saved my bomber. And he said it was his mission to find the pilot of that aircraft that saved his aircraft. And he was looking for him over in San Rafael. He was looking for him again when I ran into him in Philadelphia. And I told him at the time I didn't know who the person was who was flying that aircraft. But I told him there was some Tuskegee Airmen in the room next door. He can go there and see maybe somebody there would know. But that's the last time I saw him. But it gives you an idea on how after all these years, these bomber crew members are still heavily affected. And, you know, like I said, when you look at the death in the eye, you close your eyes and you open and there's a Tuskegee Airman that everything's okay. It really had a profound effect on your life. And as it was, after the war, President Truman issued Executive Order 9981, which he segregated the military armed forces. And that was based on the performance of blacks during World War II. And after the war, the Tuskegee Airmen went over to make a name for themselves in May of 1949. In May 1949, Las Vegas Air Force Base, which is now known as Nellis Air Force Base, the Air Force issued a little competition there with its best fighter squadrons, and it had an invitation for its best fighter squadrons to come to Las Vegas for the Air Force's first gunnery meet. Some people call it the Top Gun meet, but it's really known as the gunnery meet. So the Tuskegee Airmen sent 4 pilots. 3 of them would participate. The 4th would be a backup pilot. And they were flying this huge P-47N Thunderbolts against the smaller, more agile P-51s and the F-82s. The F-82 was kind of a weird-looking airplane. It looked like 2 P-51s joined at the wing. But the Tuskegee Airmen, they were flying a larger, heavier aircraft against these 2 aircraft. And the gunnery meet involved rocket firing, skip bombing. Skip bombing was kind of unique. You would bring your plane as low to the ground as possible, and you would drop your bomb, where the bomb would actually skip across the ground and strike the target, much like torpedo planes are dropping torpedoes. And also, dive bombing. So as it was, the Tuskegee Airmen, after the points were raised, they went up there and took the trophy. And so you start with the 1925 Army report saying the blacks were inferior, didn't have the capacity to fly fighter planes, to the point where now in 1949, where they took the Air Force's first gunnery meet. And that pretty much sums it up where that went. And even afterwards, the Tuskegee Airmen, some of them went on to serve in Korea and also in Vietnam. And I wanted to also mention that in the movie, if you ever seen the movie, Tuskegee Airmen, starring Lawrence Fishburne and Cuba Gooding Jr., I want you to look for the P-51 in that movie but the number 4 on it, because the P-51 that was used in that movie is that P-51 sitting there in the back. So it was piloted by stunt pilots, and the owner was Brent Spaghetti, and Brent was actually one of the assistants for the movie Tuskegee Airmen. And I was talking to him several months ago, and he was telling me about how things were when they were doing the filming. So you'll see Brent Spaghetti's name there in the credits. And I also wanted to mention Lieutenant Colonel J.T. Warren, who was my civilian flight buddy, lived here in Vacaville. And I wanted to mention that the 505 I-80 interchange is named in his honor. And Colonel Warren is a hero, is considered an American hero. He was on a flight crew that flew our first POWs back to the Philippines after the Vietnam War ended. And his uniform cap was on display at the Air Force Museum. And in addition, he was on the flight crew that flew the Apollo 14 astronauts back to Houston after the war. So I just wanted to mention that. And so if there's any questions or anything, I'll be glad to take them. But that's the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. I wanted to also mention this. This is the Congressional Gold Medal awarded to the Tuskegee Airmen. And as you can see, this is awarded to the Tuskegee Airmen for their bravery during World War II. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions and everything, I'll be glad to ask them for you, but I'll be happy to go with you on the board afterwards. Thank you very much.
Well, that concludes our meeting here tonight. And I'd like to talk about a couple of quick things before we finish. Obviously, due to the bad weather, the encampment had to be canceled. However, over here we have some of the Civil War reenactors with a few tables and some of the items used. If you'd like to go over and speak with them, they'd answer any of your questions. They're professional historians, can tell you all about how it was back then. Also, over by the P-51 that Aubrey mentioned, we'll be selling hot dogs if anybody's hungry and interested. But before we end, I'd like to thank the following people for helping make this event a success. First, I'd like to thank the Sanchez family for their gracious loan of the Ancestors Medal, and for Sergio Sanchez. Please stand up. For doing all the research on the medal, getting all the information together, which was an amazing thing. I'd also like to thank all of our reenactors for keeping part of our American history alive with your devotion and your commitment to the cause. Richard White, I'd like to thank you for helping us get our mannequins in order. Scott Barillo, who couldn't make it, I'd like to thank him for bringing down the cannon. Just so you know, there's 3 cannons like that exact one there that Orson and his men went and retrieved and brought back, that exact same type of cannon. I'd like to thank Mike Churchill. Mike, if you could stand up. Oh, there he is, there's Mike. Mike's got his Storm Lake collection that's over there on the corner. Very interesting read, and a lot of interesting things in Mike's family. I've known Mike many years. He's put up with me. Hey. But as a matter of fact, this flag here, you heard somebody mention about Christian Fleetwood. John mentioned about Christian Fleetwood, the 4th U.S. color. This is actually the flag. That is actually a copy of the flag from the 4th U.S. color. I also want to take this time to thank the grocery outlet and Lucky's for their generous donations to help today make a good event. I want to take this time to also thank the Role and Freedom Center's volunteers. I can't say enough about these people. They spend their own time here, they spend their own efforts here, and everything you see here today is because of their hard work. One of our goals here at the center is to give guests a new experience every time they walk in, so we rotate the aircraft and many displays many times. We've had over probably 45 aircraft last year, different things from World War II, civilian planes, current planes. The aircraft that you see raised up behind you, that's the 1912 Gonzalez Brothers biplane, put together in 1912 by 3 teenage boys from the San Francisco area. So we're in the process of building a really nice display for that, so please keep coming back to take a look at it. Other displays here at the center is an artifact from the USS Arizona, which is in our Arizona area over there, and numerous artifacts from the Doolittle raid. Many of these items came from families and veterans in the local area, so if you do have anything that you would consider putting on loan to us, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to take it and put it on display. There's things we're always looking for here at the center, items that people would like to either donate or loan to us. We're also looking for, of course, financial assistance because unfortunately this thing doesn't happen on its own. We need people to help us out with that. And most importantly, we do need volunteers to help us operating. As for this speaker series we have called The Faces of Freedom, if you enjoyed it back in April, we're going to be having another one on the 50 years of the Vietnam War. So keep an eye out for that. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. Again, you're free to go over and talk to the reenactors. If you have any questions, please be free to answer, or they'd answer them for you. And we'd like to thank you once again. We appreciate you being here and have a great time.